So everybody was calling, all the organizers got everyone they knew to call. And then we had an email your legislator campaign, and all these people were emailing, and it was enough so that when I called again to ask if they would sit down and talk to me about Common Core, they sat down and talked to me about Common Core. After they talked to me about it, and a few of others, they kind of acted like that was enough. They placated us. So we had more phone calls and more emails, and that got us to the hearings. And the hearings were stacked. 6 people came to speak in favor of Common Core. Only 2 of us spoke against it. And because that room was so packed, they had to give us a second room. We had credibility. We were heard, even though there were just 2 of us. It's you people. You people, always. It is not 1 or 2. 1 or 2 people cannot do this. You need, I gave you these handouts because my prayer is that you will sit down with a teacher and not say, this is my opinion, because they don't want to hear your opinion. Say to them, this is what was presented at a seminar, and I know you're in the profession. Can you help me with this a little bit and tell me where this is wrong? Because there are a few. There are a few scattered. Yeah, and someplace up in I think it was River Falls, and I know I was invited to one at Black River, and I spoke at that. Yeah, so I have spoken to a couple, but a lot of them are saying, no, it's a political issue. See, this is it. When the federal government's involved, it is now political. Education is the one thing that should never be politicized. Democrats and conservatives should be able to sit side by side and say, do we want our children to know their multiplication facts 0 to 10 by the end of 4th grade? Do we all think that's a good idea? Okay, that's not a Democrat or Republican issue. If you think that's a good idea, you have a right as parents to tell your teachers that that's what you want. All right, so now I've taken you through this, and we're now up to these hearings. I think that they're tired of the emails and the phone calls. So Advocates for Academic Freedom created this postcard. And whenever we've done any mailings, if you're a mover and shaker, if you're a leader, if you're willing to take these postcards and get your people to do them, I've noticed that there's greater luck if you email them the names and addresses of your legislators. So I would encourage your people to send one of these to each of your legislators, and then send one to each of the people on this committee, the hearings committee, and send one to each of the people on the education committee for the Senate and the House. So you would each be sending about 12 postcards, I believe. But it would be worth it. They're 35 cents. And there's not much room. All you need is one sentence, something from your heart. I do not want federally aligned curriculum and tests in my school. I want local control of schools protected. And I do have a set of suggested, just so you can get, it's always easier to rewrite someone else's work. It's when you have to sit down and think, now what was it that really bugged me about Common Core? And am I being accurate? Do I have my facts straight? And this brochure that I gave you, the Stop Common Core, inside there's 13 reasons, 12 reasons why Common Core is a problem. So if you don't like any of these sentences, you could use those. But my recommendation is, I'd like to see those people I've made 4,000 of these. And I've been giving groups, this is a group of 100, and I've been giving groups of 100 away. And they're expensive. They cost me 30 cents a piece to have these designed and made. So don't take them unless you're willing to get people to actually send them. They will send them, I believe, if you give them the name, the correct spelling, and the address of the legislator. But I'd love to see these sent. And if there's a mover and shaker in here who's willing to take 100.
I have a question.
Yes.
When you say willing to send, you mean the individual, one of us is willing to send it to a legislator, or we're supposed to give it to someone in the school system Besides, I'm a little confused on resetting what.
Well, you, as a mover and shaker, let's say you're the head of the women's group, the Republican women's group. So you would call your group together, or your church group, or your service group together, and you would say, let's each of us send one of these postcards to our legislators. And then you would hand them out, you would give them the addresses of their legislator, and you can give them a copy of this with some sentences on it, or you can give them, let them look at that brochure with the 12 reasons why Common Core is a problem, and your group of people would send them out.
Okay.
Your contacts.
Okay.
Okay, I've got 2 sets of 100 here, and I've got another set in my car, so,
You know what, if you can just give me a couple, I'll have more made.
Oh,
Yeah, we could.
I'll make them.
Yeah, we could all make our own copies.
Yeah, just give each one.
Yeah.
okay, well, I'm gonna leave them up here, and we'll take care of that in just a minute.
Karen,
Yes,
before you start, I'm sorry, you said legislators, but you also said the committee, the Common
Do you
Core
have a list?
committee?
there are 2 committees, and they're not always the same people. There's some repetition, but not always. There is a Senate Committee on Education. There is a House Committee on Education. Now let me give you an example. Representative Steve Castell, is he from your district?
You're talking about in the state. You're talking about the Senate and the Assembly.
In the state of Wisconsin,
Okay.
right.
Right. Yes.
Steve Castell is a conservative, and he's the chair of the Assembly Committee on Education. Senator Olson is a conservative, and he's a member of the Senate Committee on Education. Both of them were interviewed by Wisconsin Eye. I think it was on early August. And they both said in that interview that America, not just Wisconsin, but America cannot afford a dual educational system, and that they are greatly in favor of Common Core, and that they are greatly in favor of federal testing because you will be comparing apples to apples.
But isn't that obvious that they are
Yes.
current and aware of the ins and outs of Common Core?
Well, Olson's wife is going to get $1 million for the speedy and swift implementation of Common Core in our state, and she's on CESA.
She's on what?
CESA is an educational group that's pushing Common Core and helping implement it in all of our districts. So that's one set of committees. Now, that committee did not want to have these public hearings. So they created a new committee, which is the Joint Education Committee on Public Hearings for Common Core. And you would want to send it to those people as well. So if you know someone who's going to the hearings, have them write down the names of all the legislators there and send all of them one, including the Democrats. Send the Democrats one. I've got a feeling most of you are conservatives. When I told you that I was anxious for people to prove me wrong, and when I said that what you are seeing today is polite compared to most of the information I have in my arsenal, I was not kidding. This lady, Dr. Shirley McCune, at a governor's conference in 1989, this woman is still pretty influential. She's written dozens of books. She's been shaping education for an extremely long time. And the people who are following her share her views. Would anyone like to read this to the group? Go ahead.
We no longer see the teaching of facts and information as the primary function of education. Building a new kind of people must be a part of the curriculum. More and more schools are the center of all human resource development. The earlier we can intervene in the lives of people, the more effective we can be.
Reshaping America.
She does not sit on the Aspen Institute Board of Directors. yet you could see that there is a very strong overlap in their goals and their views. And I wish I could say to you that this was the minority. I wish I could say to you that this was 50%. Because if I had 50% who believed in local control of schools, who believed that parents were the ones who had the right to determine the futures of their children, their traditions, and their belief systems, I would be here sharing those people's names with you and saying, let's organize with these people. I cannot do that. I can give you the names of 5, and 3 of those 5, I don't really trust that much. Yes.
How does this impact, if at all, or yet, private independent schools, not public schools,
I'm so glad you've asked.
or homeschooling for that matter?
And homeschooling, yeah.
Well, right now, the federal government has aligned the ACT and the SAT test to Common Core, and as you saw from the standards are not focused on knowledge acquisition and skill development. They are focused on attitude changes and belief systems.
Goodwill citizens.
Yes. And so you have a situation where to have your children pass the test for college, they're going to have to be able to answer those questions the way the government wants them to be answered. If many homeschool parents want their kids to be accredited, and they go through an accreditation process so that their high school diploma will have equal importance to that of the high school graduate. And Hillsdale College is a conservative college that has never taken any federal money until they accidentally took some GI money. As soon as they took that GI Bill money, the federal government was on them and said, now you have to adopt all of our policies. And they said, no, we're giving all the money back, and they let those kids stay in their colleges, and they asked everyone to donate so those kids could stay. And so I have heard, and I don't know how far along they are, but I have heard that they and a few other colleges are working together to create a college entrance exam that would be required in place of ACT and SAT. Luther Olson and Steve Costell said we cannot afford a dual educational system, and the best place for every child is in public education.
Isn't that why they're trying to say every child by 3, or I think it's 3, they want them to be required to go to school?
Yes.
I mean, that sounds like Nazi, indoctrination.
It was.
Child care.
It was.
Child care.
Yes, they're calling it child care, but boy, you hate to say that these people have bad intentions. You just feel so terrible to even want to, and we haven't wanted to. Because we haven't wanted to, because we've wanted to trust our teachers and our school officials, we have kind of bit our tongues, and we've done it too long. Because as a conservative teacher, there were so many times I thought to myself, where are the conservative parents when I need them? Where are they? Why are they letting this happen?
They're not aware of what's going on in the schools. That's the sad reality.
Well, that's why Laurie had this meeting. And as a teacher, I tried to tell the parents, but as teachers, we're very constrained on just what we can say. So it was real hard as a teacher to get that information out. So I'm just so grateful for all of you to be here and for Laurie to put this on. I'm not going to talk about the state data longitudinal systems. It's a data collection system, which is a bio. It is, our state gave $80 million in the budget to have the system developed for Wisconsin. If we get rid of Common Core, we're going to have to fight that later. That's our next battle. That and the health curriculum and social studies standards. I've shown you the old social studies standards, and I hope that you share my opinion that they are pretty repulsive. We really need to look at those social studies books our children are using. I could tell you about this because these parents looked at their children's books and they Xeroxed the front cover, the inside page, and the lesson, and they faxed it to me or sent it to me through an email, and I was able to make copies of them and take them to your legislators. If it was just Karen, the citizen, and it was just the Rice Lake School District, my legislator would say to me, well, Karen, this is an anomaly. All my fellow legislators say that they don't have this problem. So go back and run for school board. So they could dismiss it, you see. But it was still good that if you see this kind of thing, that you go and you speak to your legislator about it, but then also send it to me, because I'm a company. And as a company, they cannot say to me, well, I'm not going to talk to you about this. You have to go talk only to your in my district, it's all Democrats. They never listen to me. And I'm not trying to disparage Democrats at all. What I'm saying is, because I was one at one time, what I'm saying is that our educational system has become so politicized that you can't talk about your children, what's happening to your children in a classroom, to someone who sees the curriculum as a political issue. And that's what happens when we have such a heavy federal overreach. But as a company, I can take all of these and say, this is northern Wisconsin, this is southern Wisconsin, this is central Wisconsin, this is all over Wisconsin. Let's do something about it. And then they all have to listen, and I can talk to all of them, not just one or two.
What good is it to talk to an individual, I mean, not because it's good to talk to an individual teacher, but what power in any way do they have? If we have these discussions with an individual teacher, is it just to try to, one by one, try to educate them?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
What could they do with that knowledge as far as being inside of the system, other than getting out?
Well, they're doing that too. Type in your computer, NEA Today, that's the name of the publication, and then I think it's called 10 Reasons to Support Common Core. It's on my Facebook page, the Advocates for Academic Freedom Facebook page. You can just go and click on it there. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation website, where they list all of the money they've given out, is on my website also, and our Facebook page. And you just click on that, and when you do, there's a search engine, and you can put in the thing, like the NEA. If you just look at it, it lists all the people in the order that the money was given out. But if you type in NEA, then it lists all the money that just the NEA got, and there's a whole page of it. If you type in AFT, all the money the AFT got. If you type in the National Governors Association, all the money the National Governors Association got. So both of those are on that site, and the teachers' comments are very interesting. They are refusing to implement Common Core in their classrooms.
Oh, they're individually saying, I'm not teaching this stuff?
So they're seeing
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who are going to principals and saying they don't like it.
Yeah. But you'd never know based on the testimony. The superintendents and principals who have been testifying have been saying it is wonderful.
The
Has there been
first
any
one,
teachers?
we went to the first one, and there was a principal from West Bend.
Yes.
Who was just, just the greatest.
Yeah, and Eau Claire had dozens of them. We had about 90 of them. From the DPI to the superintendents to the school board association. Yeah, yes.
Have-
What do you know about like the Archdiocese of Milwaukee and implementing Common Core within the Catholic schools?
Okay, there was a survey done 2 years ago of all Christian private educational groups. So there are 3 or 4 Catholic ones, a couple Lutheran, and a Methodist one. They were all surveyed, and every one of them said they were adopting Common Core for 3 reasons. One, all the curriculum was Common Core aligned, and they felt that they had to be competitive with public schools. 2, all the tests were Common Core aligned, and if their kids didn't pass those tests, they would not be seen as competitive. And 3, and this is the one that made me want to get ill the most, the teachers are being prepared to teach Common Core. Why aren't they being prepared to teach math? Why aren't they being prepared to teach science? Why aren't we teachers starting to say, stop this? You know, when I went to college in 1972, I graduated in 72, so I went in 68. You had to be in the top 10% of your graduating class to even be considered for a college of education. And you were given a solid dose of each of those. I'm in K-6. So K-6 was given a solid dose of each of those academic areas. Plus, we were given child psychology, child development, and in those days there really weren't very many special ed kids. And a lot of these special ed kids, I know some research says that my first many years, 25 years of teaching, I never had an autistic child, never once. And by the end of my career, I had an autistic child of some level of autism in almost every class. And they're saying now it's because of induced labor. Induced labor. Because, you know, they didn't do that in the 60s and 70s. And now they induce labor all the time for convenience. And our family members are doing some of that. We're really worried. You know. So it's nice. But anyhow, so I hope, did that answer your question?
Well, and do they get any money by adopting, or is it just that they want to be competitive in testing?
They don't get any, well, they are getting federal, oh, this is another thing. When we say we want vouchers for our children, vouchers are federal money. As soon as any federal dollars get into that system, they have to adopt all federal policies. So these Catholic schools and Lutheran schools have been adopting federal policy once they started taking money for free and reduced lunches, which was one of the first things they took money for. So people have said to me, Karen, just get off this public school stuff, get off, ignore the federal government, put your talents behind the school choice options, because that's the solution. And I said, no, I'm paying attention to the federal government because I know for a fact they've been undermining school choice options for over 25 years. Do you want some of these postcards?
I grabbed a bunch.
You did?
Yeah, and I'll be in touch with Laurie too.
Okay.
Get some more information.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I tutor in a Catholic school, and yes, they have Common Core.
The Archdiocese of Milwaukee, the whole Archdiocese of Milwaukee is now doing Common Core.
Yes.
There's been such an uproar that all the principals of all the Catholic schools are meeting next week, Friday, without telling any of the parents, because they're very worried about the kickback that's coming from all the parents.
Well, I've been trying to talk to them, to the leaders of all religious schools, to say to them that the parents who are involved in advocates for academic freedom are choosing private schools because they're expecting a curriculum that is superior to the public schools, not equal. Your competition, private school, comes in the area of sports and extracurriculars. It is not curriculum. And so when they're taking this Common Core curriculum, they're neutralizing any value they have. And proof of that is we have a Catholic school in Rice Lake, Wisconsin, but our Lutheran church and our Methodist and Jewish synagogues do not have school. We have more Lutherans, Methodists, Baptists rather, and Jewish students attending the Catholic school than we have Catholic children attending that school. They aren't going for religious purposes.
Right.
They're,
If you really understand curriculum, really understood it, wouldn't you just look at Common Core like it's garbage? We far exceed this.
yes, yes.
So how did so many Catholic principals or superintendents or Lutheran for that matter get duped?
They are misinterpreting their area of competition.
Because like BA, they just had a Common Core, Brookfield Academy in Brookfield, they just had a big meeting about a week and a half ago. And their principal, the headmaster said, you will have nothing to do with this. Absolutely nothing to do with this. And they assured all the parents, because all those parents, whatever ethnic or religious background, because of the Judeo-Christian values, just very generally, schools, not particularly religious, they were all very worried. They thought the standards, which are extremely high, were going to somehow go down. And he had to calm all those parents who were very proactive in wanting excellent curriculum and standards for their kids. Good for them.
Yes.
In the end, aren't we all really forced to accept it? Because if the ACT and the SAT, which are the big tests the kids need to take for their college applications, if those are being aligned with Common Core, then really all is lost. Because we have to teach our kids how to do the Common Core standards.
Yeah, but you know, California, believe it or not, really made a lot of progress in their standards. And their kids were doing better in math and in science. I think there were 2 subjects. I think the second one was science, than most other states, not better than Massachusetts, comparable.
Okay.
So they're now complaining. You have before you a petition to get the federal government out of education, and I'd really appreciate it if you'd help me with that battle. I've got some legislators in all 50 states who are working to get the federal government out of education. Wisconsin has the most signed petitions, but guess which state has the second most? California.
Wow.
Yes, when I published it in a whole bunch of national publications. And so I get petitions. Once in a while, the editors are really generous and they'll let me mention in my articles that we have this petition thing going to get the federal government out. And every time we do, I'll get about 1,000 signed petitions. And California is the second highest to Wisconsin. I'm really impressed. Yes.
Well, I'm wondering, is there any kind of deadline with the legislature in terms of when they might vote on this or how
They
it
have to
proceeds?
do it now. They are going to have their final hearing. One of the things we have to do when we go to the hearings is have a solution. We have to be willing. Remember at the beginning of my presentation, one of the things we never did is we never had a solution. And we never stood up for the financial burden that solution would cause. We have to go to those hearings and say, if you want to adopt the Massachusetts standards now, that's a beautiful starting point, and we accept it. We accept spending some of our state surplus to replace the math books, to buy a grammar book for every English classroom, to buy reading curriculum that teaches decoding, and to deal with any lawsuit brought by Mr. Evers. And we want Mr. Evers to know how insulted we are that he thinks he is the emperor of education and that he can ignore local control of schools. However you want to word that. But we need to go with a solution, and we need to say to our legislators, if you implement this solution and there's a lawsuit, we're still standing with you. Because that's one of their greatest fears. Will we be standing with them? Or as soon as the Democrats start blaming conservatives for wasting tax dollars on this lawsuit, are we going to run? And we have to be willing to say that we'll stand with them, because if we won't, they're not going to take that risk. Yes.
I just wanted to say I've been in contact with Peter Farrell, and he said if you cannot come to the hearings, to send an email to him.
Right.
And also, I think a lot of people who send their kids to parochial school are not aware. They think, first off, half of them haven't even heard of Common Core. And because my grandchildren go to a parochial school, and of course my son, leaves everything to his wife, and I've been sending him different things on Common Core, and his answer to me was, Mom, it doesn't matter, she goes to a parochial school.
Oh.
They don't understand. So here, these people are paying big tuitions to send their kids somewhere where they think they're going to get a better education. And they're not going to, and they're not going to know about it until it's too late.
Or they're homeschooled
Yeah.
and think that they can escape it that way.
You're not going to escape it
And
anyway.
they can't.
How do you spell that?
Because of the testing?
Farrell,
If you
Farrow.
go to your child goes to a private school or you...
Margaret Farrell's son.
Paul Farrell. When you say you can't escape it, we get back to the testing once they're 18.
Unless we get it out of our system completely, we are not going to be able, no one will get away from it. If we get it out of our system completely, the standards, the curriculum, and the tests, the federally aligned standards, the federally aligned curriculum, and the federally aligned tests. We have to get rid of all three. If you leave anyone in, you're going to still have Common Core. But if we get them all out, then homeschool and choice options are going to be much better
And
off.
was the only tiny loophole of this college possibly like Hillsdale who have their own entrances there?
There are a half dozen comparable colleges and they're working together, but I have not heard for a while what they're doing.
Because I suppose that's the only loophole, is that they say, we're not even going to measure that,
Yeah,
and they do their own exams.
they're saying they won't accept that test and they're doing their own exam.
Well, that's true.
Yeah. Hillsdale College is one of several. Yes, sir.
Has there been any teachers or superintendents, school board members speak to the committee at these hearings against Common Core?
No.
And what does it say about critical thinking in terms of our school system? Are they all scared to death of speaking up?
There's a code of ethics, and it's the same at your work. You do not go and badmouth your fellow teachers, your administration, your school district in public. And so it's really difficult for a teacher to do anything but go and say something positive. So if you're willing to say something positive, you are well received. And however, if you go to this NEA article and you look at the comments that the teachers are making to their own union, they're not bound by that standard anymore. And also, some of them I don't think are using their, many of them are using their real names, but some of them aren't. This gentleman, David Coleman of the College Board, worked very closely with Barack Obama in the development of his data collection system. Obama's data collection system is one of the most pervasive ever. He has information on everybody, and it is Maxine Waters and a variety of other Democrats have talked about what a valuable tool this will be for them politically. Now, when you think back about, and I'm not going to go into the data collection a lot, but on the internet, there's a YouTube video. If you type in David Coleman, Harvard College, you will get his entire discussion of Common Core, his relationship with President Obama. He's one of the key writers of Common Core as well. And the development of this data collection system and how pervasive it's going to be, how complete it's going to be, how it's going to be shared with a wide range of sources. It is going to be a way for our government to sell information about our citizens so our government can grow and pay for their programs. And if you think that's not the case, please listen to him, because he just comes this far away from saying that very thing.
What was it, search?
It's a YouTube video, and you put in David Coleman, Harvard speech. It says the College Board, which is the organization that writes the STAT and ACT tests, will use its existing and future data vault to profile low-income and Latino students from K-12 using the slogan, if they can go, they must go to college. In another part of my program, I talk about how the government has taken control of our student loan program and how they want a free college education for everyone based on merit. And when I do the data collection thing, we talk about merit and who defines merit. He's defined merit here. They're going to profile low-income Latino students. If they can go, they must go to college. So they will have merit. Yes?
I think when Milgram spoke, I think he talked about how, because of the dumbing down, that to go into college, that the colleges going in are going to be teaching their classes on lower levels because the kids, they're only going to have like Algebra 2. And so
Right.
the colleges are, the kids coming out of college, you're gonna have to go to college even to get a technical job because you're not gonna learn enough through high school.
He was saying that our kids will not be prepared for a 4-year college. They'll all have to go to a 2-year college or a technical college.
Right. And he did say Stanford will not lower their standards.
That's right.
The kids going there will have to come from other countries.
That's right, which they're already doing a lot of, yes. So they're using our tax dollars to fund those colleges to educate people from other countries who used to stay here and become American citizens and loyal Americans, and now they're going back to their home countries because there are greater freedoms in their home countries. Now, America ranks 14th in freedom. We are not the freest nation anymore. There's a study that was done about which are the freest nations out there, and we're 14th. Some little, like Belize or something like that. Oh, is that? Oh, yeah. Yeah.
We heard just this week that the Board of Regents in Madison is trying to get the legislature to raise the limit on non-resident students in Madison.
Yes.
They've already raised it 2.5%. They think eventually the new chancellor wants to go to 35%.
Yep. Because our tax dollars are paying for those people to go to school, and if we get these foreign kids into our schools, they'll get more money for their school. Even though they are not citizens of this country, we're paying for their education, and then they will leave and go back home, and they will become very competitive with our nation, but our people won't be as competitive, yes.
I get, although I don't agree with it, I get the whole sort of indoctrination, new America that's being played out here. Well, why the total dumbing down? The dumbing down because of this? Like, you're not truly educated, you become a slave to the state? But at the same time, doesn't that contradict them wanting that group of people who are thinking this, to be competitive in the world, to be successful in the world? They want to be subservient to another nation? I mean, what's their ultimate?
Well, they're telling you what they know you want to hear, so that you will not fight the program. And what they're telling you in the press is not what they say in their books.
Right.
To know what they're really, it's just like Obamacare. Obama told us all kinds of things about Obamacare. But I read the law. I don't know how many of you did, but I read the law. And so did one of the governors that I kind of used her guide and double checked to see if she was right on the things that were most interesting to me. And she was right on. I couldn't find an error in what she had said. And I knew right after the law was written we weren't going to be able to keep our doctors or our health care, because it says that in the law. Because the goal is for the private companies to not be able to compete with the government, and that we'd all be on a government program.
It's all about control.
Yeah, it's all about
So fast forward, they're trying to turn the states into the Soviet Union? I mean,
no,
it seems that's kind of
Just remember,
hearing the captain on.
a tyrant cannot take over an educated populace, and we have dumbed down the American education to such an extent that I don't know where we rate in the Western countries. They're very low.
You know, when I was teaching,
1 out of 23.
and people ask me, well, would you mind coming and speaking to teachers? And I said, well, I've done it. And they said, well, did the teachers get mad at you? And I said, yeah, they do. And they said, well, does that upset you?
Why do they get angry?
And I said, no, it doesn't upset me, because I remember when this happened to me. I hadn't been teaching very long, and I was being told that I needed to teach cooperative grouping of instruction. And I'm not going to bore you with what that was, how it was done, because that's lengthy, but my kids weren't learning. And neither were my fellow teachers' kids weren't learning either, but we were all kind of new, and we weren't going to admit it. So I went back to school, and I paid a ton of money, and I took more classes, and the teachers told me that I had to teach it, and if I did it right, my kids would excel. And I tried it, and I was so careful, and I just did everything they told me to do, and my kids weren't learning. And it was so frustrating, and I couldn't, and I went another summer back to school, and I paid more money, and I was determined to get this right, because I'm an intelligent, productive person, and I wanted to teach because of I loved learning, and I was just gonna do this right. And finally, we had a test, and somehow the results, I was able to see that all of our kids were not doing well. And that's when I started my research. And when I started my research, I was so repulsed. And I felt so stupid and naive and betrayed, because I spent all that time and all that money, and I'll never forget it. I just threw my computer on the ground and I cracked my computer. I mean, I was so mad. So when they get mad at me, I know it's there. You do that. You can't handle the anger yourself because you feel so stupid and betrayed.
It's grieving.
Yeah, and so
seeing the truth.
yeah,
Right.
and you can't admit that. You have to lash out at something. That's the first reaction. And so it doesn't. When they get angry, I know they're being moved. And some of them will say, I'm going to go home and prove you wrong. And I say, here's my email address, and as soon as you do, let me know. Because I know exactly what they're going to find. And I used to tell myself that Horace Mann and John Dewey and all these people were well-intentioned until I started reading more and more of their stuff. And these people are not well-intentioned. They are not well-intentioned.
Sort of like Margaret Sanger.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
What advice would you have if we have like a child who's just starting college to get an education degree?
Pull her out. Tell her. If you knew. You know, when I was in college, I graduated in 1972, and I saw the College of Education changing, but I didn't think too much of it because I was going to be gone, you know, in it. And I was naive in those days, and I really believed in the educational experts. And I truly didn't think too much about it until I started doing this research. And the most repulsive research I found was on teacher training programs.
Mm-hmm.
And the research, and how they deliberately lied about the research, and how they wrote in plain English why they were justified in lying about their research results, and how it didn't matter, and they were going to get federal money anyhow, and they were going to impose this teaching program on our teachers, and it is vile. It is vile. And I would tell my child, if you love math, get a degree in math. If you love English, get a degree in English, but don't go into education.
Mickey Mouse courses.
Well, it's more than that.
It's complete indoctrination. We see it at every college. I mean, name a college.
How do you make an impact? How, if you aren't going to get a master's in education, you're not going to do undergrad,
That's a waste of time.
how do you become, you know, someone who can make a difference in the future? You see the lies. How do you make a difference? Because children have to be educated.
Well, you know, when I started, women's liberation was talked about, but it truly wasn't implemented. I have a sister who became a nurse and another sister who became a dental hygienist, and I wanted to be an attorney, and I ended up in education. And then in the 1980s, women's liberation really took hold. My teacher, who was a nurse, became a dentist, and the teacher, a doctor, an attorney, and the teacher, the one who was a dental hygienist, became a dentist. And I was going to go to law school. And I thought to myself, you know, do I want to spend all my time trying to give these vile people a softer sentence? Or do I want, I was seeing all these changes in my classroom, and do I want to stay in that classroom and protect as many children as I could? I chose to stay in that classroom because the federal government had not federalized the tests, and I had flexibility. I could still do something. If we don't succeed, if our educational system is federalized, there's nothing a teacher's going to be able to do. You're going to have to sell your soul to teach the things. Do you know who that man is? What party was he a member of? Yes. Who wrote the first civil rights legislation? Frederick Douglass and a couple other people. What party fought for women's right to vote? The Republican Party. Who formed the Ku Klux Klan? Democrats. What was the purpose of the Ku Klux Klan?
People from being educated.
They threatened the lives of the blacks who were Republicans, and if they left the Republican Party, they didn't kill them, but if they refused to leave the Republican Party, they hung them. Do you know how many whites were hung with the blacks? Almost a third. A third as many whites stood up for the black population as. None of that stuff is taught in our schools. None of that stuff is taught in our schools. And I think that's just terrible, because as a teacher, I had 3 young black gentlemen who were gorgeous and intelligent, but they had attitudes, and every day in my classroom, I risked my career. And I convinced them to stay after school one night to work with a group of kids on math, and took them aside, and I said, you guys are so smart and you're not doing so well academically, how come? And they all, they had this suave kind of, and they said, well, that's just white lifestyle, I think is how they termed it. I said, oh, really? And I said, did you know that it used to be illegal to allow a black person to learn how to read, write, or do arithmetic? Anyone who was teaching a black individual was imprisoned. They didn't know that. And I said, so what you're doing is letting that idea win. And I thought they were going to go home and tell their parents on me, and I was going to be in big trouble and lose my job. I didn't hear a peep. They tried to have that attitude, but I swear, those kids were learning without letting other kids know that they were changing their attitude, and I could see that there was some improvement on the test. They still weren't turning in their homework and those behaviors, but they would sometimes ask questions when no one else was looking, kind of thing. It's such an injustice when you don't demand truth. You can't demand truth. It's such an injustice to our entire population. Because if one group suffers in our society, we all suffer. When everyone is productive, we're all so much better off.
The library's closing in 10 minutes,
Oh,
so we
I'm
have to
sorry,
get going.
everybody. I hope all your questions were answered. I hope you felt that this was worth your time. Thank you so much.